I want to go to my guest, though. We are joined with Andrei, there we are, Telizhenko. He is a Ukrainian whistleblower. There we are, Ukrainian whistleblower and former diplomat. Andrei, welcome to the show, man. How you doing today?
Good morning, Jamal. I'm doing fine. How are you? How are you doing?
I am doing great, better that you are with me. Um, I brought you on because I wanted to dig into the Maidan, but I have to get into the negotiations that are taking place. 12-hour negotiations that went on. Apparently, the US delegation explained to the Ukrainian delegation what the negotiations were about. Zelensky didn't like the fact that the negotiations were talking about sanction relief in regard to the Black Sea. And he didn't like the fact that the US seems to be on board for that sanction relief um, that they are pushing Europe into, because this is a European thing. Europe is going to have to do this. But the Trump administration obviously has a huge amount of power and influence, or at the very least they think they do, in which case they are working in order to get the sanctions removed. I suspect a lot of this has to do with showing the Russians, hey, we can be a trustworthy actor the way that the Biden administration wasn't. We said we're going to try to get these removed. We got them removed. All right, let's take the next step for some kind of deal to end the conflict. One of the things, though, that is a lagging element in this is Zelensky. He is a problem to any level of negotiations that take place. He's a rogue element, from my point of view. And apparently to the Russian and the Trump administration's point of view, considering Trump was looking for other people to take over, and considering that Putin just came out in a speech and said maybe a UN peacekeeping force, or let's say the UN should take control of Ukraine in regards to holding new and fair elections, which brought a question to my mind. How does that work? So, do you have to remove the current government in order for peacekeeping force, or for that matter, for an interim government to take over where where the United Nations exerts external influence over Ukraine for them to have elections? And can elections be fair in Ukraine? Like, meaning, can Ukraine have fair elections? How would the, and maybe you're not the person to ask this, so fair enough, but I'm curious on your take. How would this work in practice? Wouldn't you have to remove the current government that is in power now if you're talking about putting in a UN-led government into play?
I've been talking about this for over a year and a half. That the last 6 months very actively on what Russia should push within the negotiation process to have a neutral government in Ukraine, because that is the key to solving this problem. Zelensky, by the constitution, is not a legitimate president. By Article 110, he cannot prolong his actions, his authority, and his precedent, his actions, because basically wherever he signed, starting from May 20th last year, where his term ended, everything is not legitimate with the appointings and whatever. So the parliament of Ukraine today is a legitimate body. The speaker of the parliament is basically actively the acting president of Ukraine. Plus, we are a parliamentary. Ukraine is a parliamentary presidential republic. The problem is that everybody took Zelensky as a dictator, and that's what he became. And now he's basically ruling the country, keeping everybody in Ukraine as hostages. He's not letting all the men out. So basically, it's a hostage situation where he's trading with the United States and whoever he's negotiating with the people who's keeping hostages. So basically, he's a terrorist, not just by his actions, what he's doing on hitting the civil buildings in Russian territory or in eastern Ukraine, what he did when he became president during the Civil War, and continuing to do in this today. So he is a problem. First, that's one thing, and that's for sure. Anybody in Ukraine, from my point of view, even though I did speak out about the idea that there was a Timoshenko being running around, what would the situation be like with her? That she did have a possible phone call with Putin, etc. I do not support any of people who are in Ukraine. I do not trust them, because if you are in Ukraine today and you're not in prison, or you're not beaten up, or you're not
Dead.
terrorized every day,
Yeah.
or dead, yeah, that's the worst case scenario, then there's a problem. Then I think you have some strings attached to you with the deep state, the globalists, the neocons, the warmongers, etc. Timoshenko, she is more neutral. I put my expertise on that when I was asked by Mr. Sanchez, and his intern, etc. So I do
Wait,
not,
real quick.
because people started
Timoshenko
to, yeah.
she is the chocolate princess, correct?
No, Poroshenko is a chocolate prince. She is the gas princess.
Okay, gas prince. So you're saying that
Yeah.
she is more neutral.
No, she's not more neutral. She is more led into the neutral because she used to deal with Russia more often in these
Okay.
situations with gas dealings in Ukraine. And I said, and this is my expertise point of view. I do not support her if I talk about her because people
Yeah.
started writing that, oh, if you're talking about her, then you are supporting. I said, no, I worked for her for 2 years. I know who she is. That was more than 10 years ago. I know her team. But it doesn't mean that if I talk to her and explain who she is, I support her. It's just what is floating around right now as an idea. And one of the ideas that may be possible for government change in Ukraine, legal government change, and leading to a possibility of having neutral elections with everybody involved in this process without having Nazis on the ground. This is what I'm for. If Timoshenko will be that case, and on her basically prime or the last her nuances of her political career, because it is coming to an end sooner or later. She will bring peace to Ukraine and sign peace deals. Let it be her, and she'll have fair elections where everybody's going to get involved. Real opposition who wanted peace for all these years. I don't care if she agrees on that, and that would be the case. Let it be her. The United States and Russia will be agreed upon in this situation. I don't care if she will do her thing, not scam everybody over. Let it be her, but I don't trust her again. So there's a situation here that Ukraine has nobody to put in the place that actually will be able to satisfy all sides. And this leading to your questions about the United Nations and the announcement of President Putin about the situation. He said that this is one of the cases with the United Nations. There may be others
Right.
examples that he doesn't want to talk about publicly. But as I said, there's nobody else to trust in Ukraine. And if the both sides won't agree on, for example, Timoshenko, or she will not be manageable, or she will not be have the strength to pull this off, because the problem with her is it's easier with her to appoint her because she's a member of parliament, appoint her a speaker, and then she can do this process over. But again, this is when Zelensky will not be in power. Zelensky officially is not in power, right? He's not the president legally by the constitution, but physically he is not there already. We're talking about a case scenario already is being discussed where Zelensky, the dictator, illegal dictator, is not in power, or it's Timoshenko, or it's the United Nations. So when they come in, they act as an acting government at that point, and they basically coordinate and organize. And this can happen both with Timoshenko also, or somebody will be agreed upon on both sides, or separately by the United Nations will coordinate this as a process, as a world order coming in to Ukraine and basically putting a government into place which is going to be agreed upon by both sides. It
Right.
doesn't have to be only foreigners, and we're not talking about the Americans that are going to come in and rule Ukraine or whatever. It's going to be, it may be Americans, maybe Russians, and maybe Chinese, and maybe.
The Chinese said no. Chinese were
No,
like, we're not doing that.
no. This is the
Chinese were not
peacekeeping.
gonna go.
This is the. I'm talking about China said no to the peacekeeping operations. We're
Right.
talking about a management, a government,
Oh,
agreed upon by the United Nations, which are the Security Council of the United Nations countries that are involved in that. They're the ones who can be participating in a neutral government who come in, clear out the stage from all those Nazism that will be after Zelensky. When he's gone, he's fed, he's in prison, or whatever's going to happen to him.
yeah.
And they will be leading the election process for all open the borders for Ukrainians so they can come in, go back and forth. If they want to flee, they'll flee. If they want to come back and vote, they'll vote. For all Ukrainians, not only who are in the West, 6.5 million, but also to the 1.5 million who are in Russia officially after the special operations started in Ukraine by the Russian Federation. So they will all come in, be able to vote. All opposition parties will be able to vote to be participating in these elections, presidential elections. There'll be all the TV channels will be open for that. So this is what we're talking about: a possibility that would lead to some stability in that region, which is a good thing, right? And now we're seeing one side, Zelensky, say, "Oh, I don't want this to happen. I don't want sanctions to be lifted. I don't want this. I want this war to continue. I'm going to hit more. gas pipelines and energy infrastructure because he wants to stay in power. He does not represent the people of Ukraine. He represents himself. He's taking hostages Ukrainians, what we talked about. He's keeping them as hostages and negotiating with them, but he doesn't care about them. He's ready to sacrifice all those, whatever, 15, 20 million that is left in Ukraine out of the 42 that was there. 42 million Ukraine had before when this whole thing started. Now it's 15, 20 million Ukrainians left there. He's ready to sacrifice and kill them all if he's needed to stay in power. If it's going to keep him as long as that's the problem. Nobody should take him seriously. He should be left out of Ukraine, kicked out by Russia, United States, by everybody. But no, they're keeping him. The globalists are keeping him. The neocons are keeping him.
Andre, I'm sorry to interrupt. Doesn't that include?
Yeah, sorry, I long monologue.
You're perfectly fine. No, you're perfectly fine. And everything you said, I agree with, right? The only issue, doesn't that require military force? Because I don't think for a moment that Ukraine is going to be like, all right, the UN Security Council signed a resolution that said a peacekeeping force is going to come in. We're going to have an interim government. And they say, okay, we'll leave. Like, I don't get the okay, we'll leave part, right? I don't buy that.
The problem, the Nazis will leave as soon as the United States will cut the financing for the Central Intelligence Agency and all the other NSA and whatever agencies they have on the ground in Ukraine. They will basically, the coordinators of the neo-Nazis will fall apart. They will flee Ukraine.
Real quick, but Trump controls the CIA at this point. He puts this guy in, Ratcliffe.
Yeah.
Why would neo-Nazis still be there, paid for by the U.S. if indeed Trump wants to conflict?
That is my question. That's why I was pushing about this wholesale thing. So if these negotiations are happening between Russia, United States, and Ukraine is a part of those negotiations, it's not the whole thing. The negotiations are being talked about mostly about Russian-U.S. relations. Ukraine is basically a side dish in the situation. But when you're talking about the side dish, you should understand even for Trump to understand that it's going to be much easier for him if he will leave all the intel groups out of Ukraine, all the advisors, foreign military advisors that are in Ukraine working with the military intelligence, the CIA, whatever. He controls everything. Executive order, sign it to leave, whatever. If he's even an executive order, he can get a private secret order that they all leave. He should do that. It's going to be easier for him because they will not sabotage his peace negotiations. Does he understand that? I do hope so. Does he have a team that? No, but I believe in this situation he wants to make things work, and he wants to get out of Ukraine. For the United States, it's a pit, money pit that it's not going to get anything. They can make more money out of negotiating with Russia together throughout the whole world, the Arctic routes, Asia, Middle East. Now they're talking with the whole world, how they're going to work everywhere. They're going to make trillions of dollars there. Ukraine, couple of $1 billion. That's what the Biden administration was making for their pocket money and the multi-industrial complex on this war. That's what they were doing this war and continuing this war just for a couple of $1 billion. We're talking about trillions of dollars. So Trump understands that. He wants to leave Ukraine. He wants to leave Ukraine with his face safe. But there's people around his team that are still neocons or warmongers. I named a couple of names before. I don't want to continue naming them. I'm already people know who they are. We're seeing how everybody's acting, but I don't trust some people on his team that are still continuing to feed him maybe different stories and different situations. Maybe they're in good terms, maybe they're bad terms, but whatever. He wants peace, and that's good, and that's understandable, and that's everybody understands, and it will lead to that. And so he needs to get these CIA out of Ukraine. The neo-Nazis will fall apart. So basically, we're talking about the United Nations government, and with the United Nations government, there's going to be a United Nations peacekeeping operation. It's different from from what the Europeans and NATO are proposing. The Europeans and NATO don't have the international authority for peacekeeping operations on the ground, on different grounds. It has to be agreed upon by all sides. If that's the case here, it's not agreed upon on all sides. So the United Nations is the neutral government and neutral peacekeeping situation here. So the military will be from the United Nations that will come in. They will not fight. They'll just be there to keep the safety on the streets, keep the safety for the new government, have the neo-Nazis If they needed to be caught and whatever, the United Nations is going to take care of it, and they're going to they have all the records, who's involved and where, so they know where to look. So this is what one of the scenarios is looking for Kiev right now to get it back, to have give Ukraine back on a peaceful track, and hopefully there's going to be a government that will be in a good, and I hope there will be a government that will be in a good relationship with the Russian Federation, with Belarus, with Hungary, with the Slovakia, with Asia, with the United States, everybody, and not going to just say we want money. And somebody that's going to come in and be a statesman and work for the country. So that's what we're looking for, and that's what Russia is looking also to have, because it's on their border. It's
Mhm.
obvious they want some stability. They don't want a Somalia on their border. That's what they were. That's why this special operation started, because there was a total disregard to national security interests of countries around Ukraine, and one of them was Russia, which is a nuclear country. It's obvious. If you have those situations at the border of the United States, you'd have the United States bombing the hell out of whatever country they're going to be rioting against it. So that's the problem here, and nobody wants to understand that. If it was the United States, the Time magazine would write different articles saying this is for the democracy, we're fighting for freedom, whatever, and that's like Braveheart and all that kind of PR nonsense. But here it's Russia, so it's the bad Russian bear. For
No.
Mother Russia, it's bad, it's mafia or whatever. It's like it's the picture of PR, the picture for all the people, and people buy it. That's the problem. But we want peace. We want something good to happen in this region, and we want the stability to start and get rid of the Nazis that are in Ukraine, headed by Zelensky, who's only making money for himself. And as I said, there's RICO cases happening right now. Maybe will be open in the United States against Zelensky and his team. Not only him, but people involved from the former Biden administration who are money laundering U.S. taxpayer dollars from Ukraine, United Arab Emirates, European banks, American banks, and into their pockets. So that is
Wait,
what is going to happen
how do
next.
you know that? How do you know that there are RICO cases being? Look, I wouldn't be shocked by it, but how do you know that there are RICO cases being opened
No,
against?
there are people who are fleeing from the Zelensky team or trying to save their. I don't want to say what they're going to save, but save themselves.
I'm
Okay,
going to say
let's
their
keep it.
ass. Yeah, you can say
Yes, save
it.
their. Yes, I don't know whether because I don't YouTube all these politics. They're gonna.
You're
I don't want
perfectly
to say.
fine. Yeah,
Yeah, so save their
you're
ass, and
fine.
basically, they're giving out information to the new administration, and that is what they're doing. So this is on Zelensky, and there's a lot of stuff that the United States knows for himself what happened, but there's a lot of stuff that is coming in there, and what they're going to be some maybe make some stuff happen on Zelensky and his team. So he has no way out, nowhere to run. He has nowhere to go. He's politically done. Now it's just the timing when it's going to happen. He's like a Hitler in 1945 in February 1945 in his bunker, thinking he's going to win, but it's already done. The Red Army is in Berlin. It's finished. So the same thing here. It's just the matter of time. And Russia could have taken over Ukraine. They didn't because, first of all, well, it's a lot of bodies, a lot of destruction. Nobody wants that to happen. Kiev is sought as the Russian. It's a Russian city. It was in all the documents from 1,000 years ago. Documents. It's called Russian. Russian Ruski Horod. That's what it is. It's the mother of the Jerusalem of the Orthodox Church is Kiev, and that's where all the Orthodox Christianity came from Kiev into all over the world, into Russia and whatever. So for our Orthodoxy, our Christian Orthodoxy, so it's a sacred city. Nobody wants to destroy it. So that's why there's negotiations happening for peaceful transition. But that's what Russia never wanted this war. They wanted peaceful transition at the beginning. But the United States, the Biden administration put Ukraine into this war to make money, to destroy Russia, and they failed.
I just want to nail this down. There was issues with my mic apparently. I don't know why my gain was turned up to high. You were saying that there are RICO cases against Zelensky and some of his cohorts, and that the people who are fleeing are effectively trying to avoid prosecutions that are expected to take place. You're not the only person I heard say this. Arestovich made the same point, saying Zelensky is going to end up in a jail cell for everything that is effectively taking place now. Also, it is not an anomaly for a Ukrainian leader to end up in jail. Zelensky has been trying to put Zelensky in jail, saying if he runs, he's going to put him in a cage. And from my understanding, there were other Ukrainian leaders that were also arrested. So that wouldn't necessarily be shocking. I just haven't heard anything about it up to this point.
Yeah, look, what Zelensky did with Zelensky and the situation. Zelensky is a puppet of the West. Zelensky wanted him in jail. He would be in jail and he would not talk. But he was saved by the West, sent as the ambassador, even though he was general, an active general who destroyed half of the Ukrainian army while he was the general, knowing that it's going to be done, it's going to be destroyed, knowing that they knew what the Russian forces are. Maybe the soldiers on the ground were propaganda, but Zelensky knew what they're going to face. They're going to be destroyed. And he still announced, being the head of the Chief Joint Armed Forces of the Ukrainian Army, announced that he wants to roll his tank throughout Moscow right before a couple of months before the war started, when there were peace negotiations happening before the war started with Russia, Ukraine, and the United States. So this is what Ukraine was about. That's not just my propaganda saying Ukraine was involved. No, there were announcements by the high government officials like Zelensky. He's involved in this war fully. He made those announcements. He destroyed half of the Ukrainian men who he sent to die. He knew they're going to die. Now he's sitting out in London, saying, "I'm going to run for president. I'm so patriotic, etc., etc." Now we cannot go against Russia. We cannot fight Russia. We don't have the power. His brother, who's also a military guy, he's now also working for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. He's a diplomat. They all saved their asses. I'm going to say that now because I don't know how to say it. So, that is the problem. These people are hypocrites. They destroyed their own country, who they say they should love, and at the same time they say, we vote for us and we're going to be the next leader. The same thing with like Arestovich, people who finance him. But that's another thing. Dubinsky, like we're talking about, there's people like Dubinsky in prison, allegedly in prison, but they're giving out tweets, they're giving out interviews, 40-minute interviews from the cell in court. And there's more than 15,000 political prisoners in Ukraine. One of them, the famous person, Gonzalo Lira, who was a U.S. citizen, who got killed in the jail cell in Ukraine. There's political prisoners who are being talked about in the United Nations. They don't have a word. They cannot speak out from a jail cell or from a courtroom. Why this guy comes there in a suit? I was in courtroom when Timoshenko was being jailed in for with Andrei Yanukovych, and I knew when she tried to speak out, they'll clear out the whole press with force out of the room, and there would be no problem. There was a different situation, and it was more democratic then. But here we have a total we have a total dictatorship. This guy would be dead if he would speak out. But the problem is, with Dubinsky, sorry, I'm going to finish and then I'm going to let you talk. Sorry. With Dubinsky, he ratted out his former boss, Kolomoisky, to the FBI, and that is why he has protection. And his support, he's the same guy with Zelensky, he's the same page. Dubinsky was the right-hand man to Kolomoisky, and he worked for him very closely. I know Dubinsky pretty well also. He ratted him out. That's why he has protection. That's why he's the puppet of the West. He's trying to make Nelson Mandela out of him. But the problem is so many people died in Ukraine, and they're trying to make people fools again. It's nonsense. This is just what the globalists are doing. This is what these corrupt oligarchs are doing, what Zelensky is doing. They don't care about what the people think. They will just want to put a PR picture, sell it to the West, and through the West, bring it to the Ukrainians. That's what Dubinsky's project is about.
In full transparency, I've tried to get an interview with Dubinsky. There was communications over Twitter. As you point out, it's very weird that he's in a prison cell and yet he can give all these interviews and everything else. I'm trying to get an interview with him. I will bring up some of these points. If I do, up to this point, there's been no response as a back and forth. I want to get your take on something before I let you go. Donald Trump is coming up with a new grain deal. And this new grain deal is effectively rape. The U.S. wants all minerals forever. This is Lord Bebo. The details of the rare earth agreement, which is proposed to be signed, explain right here. The U.S. is talking about all minerals and rare earths. This is oil, gas, potentially new discoveries, and existing across the entire territory of Ukraine or whatever's left of it. Rights of production for both state and private companies. Revenue is converted directly into currency. The fund's money is transferred to a bank abroad. If something gets lost or stolen, Ukraine has to compensate for it. The fund is managed by 5 people, 3 of them from the United States with full veto power. The U.S. does not contribute anything to this because it has already provided the $300 billion contribution, as Donald Trump talks about it. The agreement is valid indefinitely changes only with permissions of Americans. And the U.S. has first night rights to new infrastructure projects and the right to veto the sale and resources to other countries. And just to be clear, nothing in this has anything to do with security guarantees for Ukraine. The deal in itself is a security guarantee for Ukraine because the U.S. is going to own all of it. We have about 1 minute. What time is it? Yeah, we have 2 minutes. This is rape.
I can tell you, I have a point of view on this. Sorry, again, I'm talking too much today.
No. I asked you the question. I intruded the moment I asked the question. Give me your take on this. We have about 2
And
minutes.
I've been thinking about this. It's very interesting. I've been talking to people, and from my point of view, from what I acknowledged in this situation, I think it's pretty smart. It's a win-win situation for America. What they're doing is they're proposing a kill deal for Ukraine, basically. At the same time, Ukraine to this Ukraine's government today, which legal or illegal, whatever it is, but the people who can actually take charge in Ukraine, Timoshenko or other politicians, basically Trump wants peace. Trump doesn't want Ukraine. There's nothing to gain out of it. Even if they take everything, there's still it's not what they can make out of the whole world together with Russia. So it's a win-win deal for Trump. But why? If Ukraine signs it, he wins. He gets whatever he wants from for getting invested into Ukraine by the U.S. government because it was taxpayer dollars. He gets it back to the United States. Or if Ukraine is smart, but it's not smart because it's under globalists and everybody who's appointed that they're clowns and that politicians are not statesmen, not even politicians, but statesmen. If it would be smart and there'd be a statesman in the government who would come to Russia and say, we have this bad deal by the United States. Your guys are negotiating right now, right? And we need to negotiate. We need to negotiate. So Trump wants to put Ukraine on a negotiating table with Russia. Because with Russia, it would be easier to negotiate for the United States to get something out of Ukraine, or together with Russia investments, trillions of dollars will be made. So by this deal, he's pushing Ukraine. Please negotiate with your so-called rival, if you call him rival. It's not a rival. We were one country 30 years ago, and we still are one people. There's a lot of families in the divide. So go negotiate because you have a shitty deal here. Make a deal with Russia, and they'll make a deal with us, and we will have a win-win situation. We will have peace then. So this is what it is about. That's my analysis on the situation.
I appreciate that point of view. I think that ignores that Donald Trump is trying to get any and everything that he can out of it. Ukraine is not going to negotiate Russia under these terms. In fact, I'll go further and I have to let you go because my next guest is here. But if you remember, it was the trade deal that became the impetus for the overthrow of Ukraine in the first place. The EU wanted a deal. The deal was crappy. Russia had a better deal. They wanted Yanukovych to accept that deal. Yanukovych said, I'll give it a pause. And then you get Victoria Nuland on the phone effectively saying we're going to overthrow the government. I appreciate that point of view. I disagree with that, but I appreciate it. My man.
Okay. We can have a bottle of wine on that. So
Look, we'll see, right? The wine is on me. If indeed Ukraine goes to Russia and says, hey, let's make a deal, because this deal sucks. I don't think that's going to happen, but we will see.
This administration will never happen, but maybe the new one will do it. So
Fair enough. Andrei Telizhenko, he is a Ukrainian whistleblower, a former diplomat, and a good friend of this show. My man, thank you for this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jamal. God bless.
You too. Bye-bye.